Hey friends, welcome back to a new mukbang video. Today we have another interesting topic for you guys. Today we're going to talk about financial minimalism. I would say topics surrounding money are always a little controversial, so I hope that we can maybe give you guys some transparency, but also we're definitely not qualified financial advisors, so
don't just take our words for it and do your own research.
Yes. Today we have a little bit of weird food going on. We're actually eating leftovers today, which is why we're eating a lot of different types of food, because we have a little bit of everything kind of left. We don't like to throw away food. This is kind of our first course. We have a pea pesto that I made last night. And then for some extra veggies, we have a cucumber salad that I just made. And then the second course will be a chickpea curry, but we'll start with the first course first. Okay, so first of all, maybe we should talk about and clarify what financial minimalism actually is.
There are many different reasons why people adopt a minimalist lifestyle. I think for many people, finances is one of those reasons. Minimalism can be a great way to save money because you don't spend so much money on things you don't need. And I think financial minimalism is all about being intentional about your finances.
Minimalism in general is about knowing what is important to you, what brings value to you, and then investing in that. And I would say it is the same for financial minimalism. I would say it is when you cut back on things that aren't so important and then spend your money on things that are really important to you.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think many people don't really think much about the way they spend their money. And they, for instance, might spend a lot of money on things like takeout food or fast fashion, and they go out and buy a new outfit every month. And for some people, that might be kind of a good decision for them because that's something that's very valuable to them and they really enjoy eating takeout and they like the convenience of not having to cook. But I think for most people, if they really think about it and they look at the amount of money that they spend on those things,
it adds up.
It really adds up. And if they compare it to other things they could do with the same amount of money, they might realize that actually there are other things that they could do with the money that would bring them much more value. For example, there's always the old Starbucks coffee example that every financial advisor or financial guru tells everyone. But it's kind of true if you spend...
Maybe you should elaborate for those that don't know.
Yeah, I just was about to. So if you spend $4 a day on a Starbucks coffee, which is not that much if you just look at the single coffee, but over the course of 1 month, that would be $120, and over the course of a year it would be more than 1,000. And you could easily prepare coffee at home and put it in a to-go travel mug, and you have an equally good coffee and you save over $1,000 easily. This money you could invest in your retirement fund, you could go traveling with it, you could invest in some kind of high-quality item that you know would bring value to your life. Some people genuinely really like Starbucks coffee and to them it's like a great part of the day, but I think most people, if they really think about it, have better uses for $1,000 than spending it on Starbucks coffee. And I think if we bring this intentionality to every aspect of our finances, we can realize that we actually have a lot more money than we might think.
I also think a good question to ask yourself is, why are you making money, or why are you earning money? What do you want to use that money for? Because a lot of times, I think a lot of people go to work, and I even heard somewhere that we actually have less free time than ever before. We're working a lot. And of course, you come home late at night, maybe you went out early, and you're just super tired, and all you want to do is just relax, watch some TV. And the same on weekends. Maybe you're super tired from the week and you just want to sit on the couch and watch TV. And then you see all these commercials on the TV that tell you that you need to buy this new thing because you're not good enough without that thing. And they have all the tricks up their sleeves in those commercials. They know how to pressure you, I guess, subconsciously. And then you go out and you buy stuff, and then you buy more than you need and more than you earn, and then you have to go back and make that money. And are you making that money just to buy the stuff that is then lying around, or what is your purpose for your money? I guess you should maybe think about.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of our money goes to things that, if we think about it, don't bring that much value to our lives, and we could do so much better things with it. We could travel or invest it, or if we don't necessarily want to travel, we could just cut back on our work hours and maybe work part-time instead of full-time, and just have a lot more free time and
enjoy that with family.
Yeah, enjoy your time with the family or out in nature, read your favorite book, maybe write a book if that's a project that you want to do one day. We usually can't afford to spend much time on those things because we have to work to buy all those things we think we need. And for some people, they don't have the luxury of doing this. They might have a mortgage to pay off, they might have a family to support, but I think many people could really benefit on adopting a more minimalist lifestyle and cutting back on expenses. And even if they have to support a family, they can still cut back on things they don't need and just pay off their mortgage faster. Yeah, think about what you value and how much money you actually need for the kind of life that you want.
That is a good one. I've also seen this, I guess, format of video going around YouTube called, I think, How Much I Spend in a Week or so. And I watched a few of those videos, and to me personally, it was really shocking what they spent money on. For some people, for example, there was this annual Disneyland membership, I think, and that was so incredibly expensive. I was really shocked that they would pay so much money to visit Disneyland, which is probably so crowded, and I don't know. I mean, if it is super valuable to them, then maybe, but for us personally, we don't spend like on a week-to-week basis. We pretty much spend money on groceries, but then there's not really anything else. Maybe if something breaks or we need to replace it, but no, there's not much else. Of course, it's different if you have a family, you have children, maybe they have tuition fees, or you have someone who is sick and needs medicine. Of course, that is different. But those videos I was watching, they were spending money on things that I would personally be able to easily cut back, whether it's some type of shopping that was impulsive or just things that you don't 100% need.
I think it's true that not everybody can afford our lifestyle, which is very cheap. We really don't spend much money. But I think many people also make an excuse out of it. They say, well, I can't go minimalist because I have a family, because I have a mortgage to pay off. While it's true that they might not be able to go to the extremes that other people can go to, there are still most certainly things that they can cut back on. Even if you have a family, you can buy a used car instead of a new car. You can quit your cable TV bill and just watch free TV or Netflix instead, which is much cheaper. So there's always things you can cut back on. Don't just think about these hardcore minimalists who live in a tiny apartment and don't have a car and cook every day. So even if you might work full-time and maybe don't have the time to cook every day, you can still meal prep on the weekends. If you can't afford to live without a car because you have to get your kids to school, you can still get a used car that is much cheaper than a new car. And there's always things you can do. I think the biggest chunk of our money goes to necessities like rent, health insurance, and food. And then the second big chunk is probably travel. And other than that, it's really not that much.
Well, we don't see money as a goal. It's only just like the in-between step to, for example, enrich our lives with travel or with experiences or things like that. There are probably people who say that having a lot of money is the goal.
Yeah, I think many people have, for example, the goal of becoming a millionaire or of having a six-figure income. And they don't really think about why 1 million? Why is 1 million better than 900,000? Why is a six-figure income better than making 70,000 a year? Like, think instead of the specific amount of money, which really doesn't mean much, you should think about the lifestyle you want. What's the kind of neighborhood you want to live in? how much do you want to travel, what are your passions, and how much does it cost to pursue them. And if you just look at the things you need to have the life that you know brings a lot of value to you, then you will usually see that you don't need $1 million, so you don't need a 6-figure income. Things are a lot cheaper than we think they are.
Should we serve the second course? So for the second course, we have our curry. I'm really excited for this one. We both wanted the curry more than the pasta. So let's take a deep dive into the question, can money buy happiness?
I think that it can, but that most people overestimate to what amount. I think, for example, if you have a lot of money, you can buy things that bring value to you. You can go traveling if that's something you're into, or you can afford to work less and spend more time with your family. Those are things that money can buy, and those are things that I think can bring happiness. But those are also things that you don't need that much money for. Like, if you have an average income, you can probably afford most of these things. If you just cut back your expenses and live a more minimalist lifestyle, you don't need to make tons of money and buy expensive sports cars or mansions. I think those are not the ways in which money buys happiness. The ways in which money buys happiness are very simple. You don't need to be rich. I think there's studies that support that increased money also brings increased happiness, but only up to a number of around 70,000 a year. People who make 70,000 a year are on average happier than people who make, for example, 40,000 a year. But at that number, it pretty much stops, and a person who makes 70,000 a year isn't less happy than a person who makes 10 million a year. So I think that shows that it's more about not worrying about money and about affording like the simple pleasures of life, and it's not about the luxuries that we sometimes think we need from watching all those movies and ads.
I would even go to lengths to say that oftentimes the more money you make, the more unhappy people are and the more problems you have. Oftentimes with more money, you have more problems. Of course, you can solve basic problems like debt, and if you're sick, you can pay for treatments. I've never heard that study with the 70,000, but I can imagine it going up to a certain amount and then all the basics are kind of covered. I imagine if you have a lot of money, you also have a lot of stress with all kinds of different things. I would also agree that money can buy happiness in a way. For example, if you need some kind of health treatment, if you have the money and it costs millions of dollars, you can pay that. But I also feel like often people think that if I have this amount of money or if I have a house, then I've reached my goal and then I'll be happy. But you can also be happy without the house. It's just a matter of how you view things, I guess.
Yeah, I think while money might help with some things, it's absolutely not necessary to be happy. I think you just have to look at people around the world and you will quickly see that, for example, depression rates are the highest in Western countries like the USA, even though those are also the richest countries. And for example, in more indigenous communities, like in the Amazon rainforest, there's pretty much no depression at all. And they have no money at all. They don't have any of the comforts or luxuries that we in the West have. And still they have lower depression rates than us. And I think that this goes to show that money doesn't bring happiness the way we think it does. I don't know why these people are necessarily happier than us. I think it has a lot to do with the sense of community they have, and that they are still more in touch with nature and they live together as one big family, while we in the West often have a more individualist and competitive kind of view. We see others not as our community or our friends, our family, but more as our competition or as the annoying people we have to get through in the subway. And it's just not that pleasant of a life to be constantly worrying about having more than your neighbor and keeping up with everybody.
So I guess our answer is yes and no. It can to some extent buy happiness, but it doesn't necessarily bring happiness. It can also do the exact opposite.
Yeah, I think very poor people can be very happy and
Yeah.
very rich people can be very unhappy.
Yeah.
And in the end, it depends on what you do.
Yeah, what your mindset is. Okay, so there's also this thing called lifestyle creep or lifestyle inflation. So what is it and how do you avoid it?
Lifestyle inflation means that if your income becomes bigger, you adapt your expenses to that level. While in college, you may be completely fine with living in a tiny apartment, cooking your own food and riding around on your bike everywhere and not having a car. As soon as you get a job, you will probably move into a bigger apartment, start paying more money for restaurants and takeout food, get a car, and it doesn't stop there. Even millionaires, they might have a Porsche and then they get richer, and then instead of the Porsche they buy a Ferrari, and then if they get even richer they buy a Bugatti instead of the Ferrari, and they just keep spending more and more the more money they have. And no matter how much money someone makes, they find ways to spend it. And I think that's one of the reasons why you often see, for example, Hollywood stars or professional athletes go broke after their careers, because while they make millions of dollars before, they also spend millions of dollars. And then as soon as the money stops coming in, they're completely broke.
It's always much easier to upgrade from a small apartment to a mansion, but it's not as easy to go from the mansion back to that tiny apartment.
There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door, I think. I haven't read it, but I've heard that one of the key points of this book is that the majority of millionaires actually live below their means. So they live more average lifestyle. That's why it's called The Millionaire Next Door, because from the outside they don't look like millionaires. They look like average people, but they make a lot more money, and instead of upgrading their homes, upgrading their cars, they save and invest, and that way they build wealth in a sustainable manner and don't go broke as soon as the money stops coming in.
I think we also have to ask ourselves why we do this. Why do we inflate our lifestyle as soon as we have more money? And I would say it's because we want to show other people that we have more money now. My more expensive car means that I got a raise and I'm richer now, and I live in this rich neighborhood because I'm this rich. And often also on Instagram, the lifestyle that people lead, I'm not sure if they can afford that comfortably. I can imagine a lot of them leading that kind of luxury lifestyle without having the money to support that. And it's kind of that keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, that you want to be better than the neighbor and you want to be better than that friend from college you want to impress. And that is not really a good reason to do things because you want to impress other people.
You always want to keep up with the people around you. So if all your neighbors buy a nice car, you don't want to be the only one driving that old car, because then you don't fit in, you aren't part of the cool kids if you want. But in a way it never stops, because if you start in a company at the very bottom and your goal might be to reach the middle management, once you're there, then all your friends are middle management, and you don't compare yourself to the other entry-level employees anymore. You compare yourself to the managers, and suddenly middle management isn't enough anymore, and you want to go to the top management. Even if you reach the top management, you don't compare yourself to the middle managers anymore. You compare yourself to other top managers, and you want to go to a bigger, more prestigious firm maybe, and that way it can never stop, because you always compare yourself to the people around you, but the higher you rise, the higher raise the people around you. So it's kind of becomes a rat race that you can never escape if you keep doing it.
Yeah, and we're not saying that you're not supposed to be ambitious. You have to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Is it because you really want to, or is it because you want to impress your friends and family?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with becoming the top manager of a big company, especially if you're into business and you have a passion for it, and then this is amazing. But I think many people do it just because they want to show other people, because they want to keep up with other people. They want to have a cooler, more prestigious job than their neighbor, and that's the wrong reason to do it.
And I think also it's not just because of the people surrounding us. It's often also sometimes that advertising tells us, they tell us that we're not enough and that we need to buy this new thing to be good enough or cool enough or better than the neighbors. And there's this video called The History of Stuff that is really good. You showed that to me. I'll leave that down below. And for example, in fashion, there's never anything extremely new. It is always something that has been here before. In the video, they take the example of a thick high heel. Then the next year, the skinny heel is in. And then the next year, it's the thick heel again. It's not something new. It is just, if the skinny heel is in this year and you're still wearing the thick heel, then it is obvious to everyone that you're kind of the loser that doesn't go with the trend. And they keep changing because then to others they will know how old-fashioned you are, I guess. Or same as with the car, they'll change the headlights or they'll change the color, and then you're suddenly the one that isn't fashionable. And you have to keep buying to keep up with being cool and fashionable and relevant.
I think humans are just social animals, and these companies know it, and they exploit it to make money. They know that if you wear something that is out of fashion, you will feel like you're not part of the tribe anymore, and that's something we just evolutionary are programmed to avoid. And these companies know it, and they try to exploit it. So we have to be very aware of what's happening to not fall into that trap, because it still happens to us, I think. It happens to everyone. No matter how great you are at minimalism, you always compare yourself to others. I think even within minimalism, there's this thing that people always compare how much things they have. So suddenly it's not about who has a nicer car, but it's about who has fewer things. And it's in the end, it's the same kind of thing that's happening in their brain.
Same competition.
Yeah, that's the same competition. They just want to be part of the tribe, and they want to show their worth to the community.
Yeah, they feel like if I have less things, I'm the better minimalist. So I guess as a tip to avoid it, we said to be conscious of how the system, I guess, works.
And I think also to avoid those inputs. If you move to a nicer neighborhood, as soon as you make more money, you will suddenly have wealthier neighbors who you compare yourself to. But if you keep your house small and live in a nice but not too fancy neighborhood, even if you make a lot more money, then you won't have the need to compete with your neighbors, because your neighbors aren't suddenly much wealthier. And that way you don't have that incentive to always keep up with the people around you.
And we're also not saying that it's bad to want a, I guess, more high-end lifestyle and want to live in a more luxury neighborhood, but you should be conscious of this effect.
I think there's a border where it stops being reasonable. In the beginning, it's very reasonable to want to live in a nicer neighborhood because there's less crime, there's better schools, maybe you're closer to the ocean and you like going for walks at the beach, and those are all very reasonable things that could improve your lifestyle. But if you go from living in a $10 million house to living in a $100 million house, it just gets bigger and more extravagant, but it doesn't bring more actual real life benefits, I think.
Okay, so our last question is, how should you manage your money? And of course, we're not going to say how you guys should manage your money. That is very personal and very specific to everyone's situation, but we're going to talk about how we manage our money, and maybe you find some inspiration in that. I would personally say that what is most important is that you spend less than you earn. And this might sound really simple or dumb to say, but I think there are a lot of people that do spend more than they can afford. And I've even heard people say that if you cannot buy the item twice, you can't afford it.
I think especially with credit cards and things like financing, even like smaller electronic items, people tend to spend more money than they actually have.
And also this whole concept of, I think it's called afterpay. If you cannot afford the $100 dress right now, that's okay. You can pay $20 a month and then you can afford the dress. And that is really dangerous. If you cannot afford it up front, then you cannot afford it at all.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how we manage our money.
I think there are two main things you have to keep in mind for your personal finances. The first is to increase your income, and the second is to decrease your expenses. Really, if you simplify it, that's all there is to finance. Financial minimalism is especially helpful when it comes to spending less money. It's important to mention that you should still try to increase your income, try to get a promotion or have a side hustle, or
if that's something you want. It shouldn't be the goal.
It shouldn't be the only goal to have more money just for the sake of having more money. But if you want to afford a better lifestyle, move to a better neighborhood so your kids can go to a nicer school, then that's something you should consider. You can only decrease your expenses to a certain level and then that's it. But you can increase your income in theory indefinitely. If you need more money, you should consider both sides of the coin, so to say. And when it comes to spending money, I think it's first helpful to actually know where you are spending money. And there's a lot of free apps that you can use to track your expenses. You don't need to do it all the time, but I think it's really helpful to do it at least for a month or two, so you get an idea of where your money actually goes. Maybe, like I said in the beginning with the Starbucks example, many people might go to Starbucks every day and just don't think about it. But if you track your expenses and suddenly see that it's $120 a month, you might actually realize, oh, that's a lot more than I thought. And the second important thing is that you take a portion of your income every month that you don't spend and invest instead. I, for example, have 3 accounts. I have my standard checkings account that I use for paying the bills and receiving money. And then I have a savings account where I transfer a certain amount every month. And then I have my investment portfolio, and every 3 months or so I use the money from my savings account to rebalance it, invest in the stock market. I invest in ETFs because it's more simple and convenient compared to buying stocks of specific companies. I did that before and I actually made some good profit with some of them, but overall you need to invest a lot of time into it, and there's also a much higher risk involved.
And I think often, especially when you're younger, I would say we're pretty young when it comes to financial experience. Finance is always this boring sounding and complicated looking thing, but I think you can't start too early. I think a lot of people are lazy or scared that they don't know anything about the financial world and they're going to make mistakes, and because they're so scared of making mistakes, they don't do anything at all. And that in itself can be a mistake, because the sooner you start saving and start investing, the more you will kind of make, I guess. Well, depending on where you invest. But if you invest safely or in a not too risky way. I don't know, when I started, maybe 3 years ago or so, you recommended 2 books to me that I read, and that gave me, I had zero knowledge about the stock market and, and just financial things in general. And that book gave me a really good overview of what is possible or what is a good general tip, and you start working from there. I wouldn't say that I know a lot about finance now, but I know a lot more than I did before, and I'm really glad that I started investing a few years ago. You would only regret that you didn't start earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this thing called the compound effect. That means, for example, if you invest $1,000 today with 10% interest, then the next year you will have 1,100 of that money, and then the next year the 10% isn't just on the $1,000 in the beginning; it's also on the 100 that you made the year before. So it compounds and gets bigger and bigger. And even if you only invest $1,000 in the first year, 50 years later you will make a ton of money just because it keeps compounding and compounding and compounding. I once heard investors say that many people don't start because they think, well, in the first year I only make $100 anyway of the money and I invest. But if you start later, it's not the first years you're missing out on, it's the last years, because you have a shorter total amount of years, and it's not the $100 you would make in the first year, it's the $10,000 you would make in the 50th year that you are missing out on. And that's why it's so important to start early, because the compound effect means that the sooner you start, the more chance you give your money to compound in 10 years and 20 years or in 50 years. And that's when the compound effect really starts to make a big impact.
Yeah, and you don't need to have a lot of money to invest. You can start with $100 if you only have $100. It's better than nothing at all.
Like you said, you don't need much money, and it's all about the consistency. So even if you can only afford to save $50 a month, if you do it consistently, that over time still compounds to a lot of money.
I also think that people underestimate the money that is in physical things that they own. I feel like we all have a lot of stuff that is just lying around that we never use. And if we go back and declutter, get things out that we never use, for example, we recently decluttered our bookshelf. If you really think about it, there's so many things you can get rid of, but then a lot of people just throw that into the trash because they don't want to deal with it. But if you take a little extra time and try to sell it, for example, we sell our used books and also some of our clothes that we don't want anymore. That does really sum up. We also had some furniture and even old things that I didn't think anyone would buy. Like an old pot that wasn't super great, but in the end someone really needed that pot and was thankful that they could buy that pot for, even if it's just $4 or so. If you sell your clothes for $2, $4, but if you sell 10 pieces of clothing, then there will be $20 or $40. And of course you can think, okay, $20, $40, that isn't a lot, but
it adds up.
Yeah, it always adds up. It's always these small things that often can make a big difference. So I would say don't be shy to sell your old things. Invest a little bit of time to get a bit of your money's worth back.
Yeah, do you remember a few weeks ago we found a bunch of books in the trash that somebody else just threw away? And we thought, hey, these books still look very good.
Yeah.
So we took them inside and just sold them online, and we made, I think, 30 euros. And it was 10 minutes of work to put them online. So we just made 30 euros in 10 minutes, which is a pretty good hourly wage. So don't underestimate the small money you can make from things you have lying around in your house, or even trash you find somewhere. It might actually have some value. For example, Gary Vee has this thing on YouTube where I think he calls it trash talk, where he goes to garage sales and buys things that other people don't want anymore, and often they sell valuable collector's items for a few bucks, and they just don't take the time to look up the things they own and just put it on sale in the garage sale because they want to get rid of it, but they might actually be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. And if we just look at the things we have, we can make some good money on the side by selling things we no longer need.
Okay, to sum it up, I'm going to leave this question to you. Do you have any book recommendations or resource recommendations that you would recommend? Because you are the book expert, I would say.
I can't make too many specific book recommendations because most of the finance books I've read are specific to Germany.
But maybe we have some German viewers.
Yeah, maybe we have some German viewers. So for the German viewers, there are two books I want to recommend. One is called Cashkurs by Dirk Müller, and the other is Souverän investieren in ETFs und Indexfonds.
I will leave it down below.
By Gerd Kommer. So those are two great German books, but as I said, they are more specific to Germany. Especially when it comes to finance, there are big differences between the countries. For example, the USA have their Roth IRAs and 401ks, and in Germany we have things like the Riester-Rente and Bausparplan, and those are very different things in different countries. So you kind of need to do your own research and look for good finance books that are specific to your country, because you can't just adopt an American finance book to Germany necessarily, because there are just completely different laws, completely different institutions that don't exist here. But there are more general finance books about maybe the mindset behind it that are more universal. There's one nice book, it's called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a more simplistic book. It shouldn't be the only finance book you read, but if it's the first finance book you ever read, you get a good introduction into the basics of finance. Another book would be Walden by Henry David Thoreau, which most people probably wouldn't consider a finance book, but it's pretty much the original book on minimalism. And in this book, Thoreau talks about his experience, how he moved into a small cabin in the woods that he built himself and lived there for 2 years. While he lived in that cabin, he kept his expenses so low because he grew his own food. He didn't go out into town to shop. He just lived a very minimalist lifestyle, and that way he could afford to spend only 6 weeks, I think it was, per year working, and he had all the rest of the year just to observe nature, to write his book, to read, do the things that he loves doing most. And I think he was one of the first who considered this concept that in the end the money you spend is the time you spend to make this money, and by reducing your expenses you can afford to work less and spend more of your valuable time doing things you love to do. In the end, time is a lot more scarce and valuable than money, because we can always find a way to make more money, but our time is limited, and at one point we will all die and we can't buy more time no matter how much money we have. So I think it's as relevant today as it was when he wrote it. So that's also a great book as an introduction.
To finish this off, summarize financial minimalism in maybe a sentence or two.
Okay, I would say reduce your expenses to the minimum and only spend money on things that are necessary or that bring you a lot of value. And be very conscious and intentional about the way you spend your money, so you don't spend money on things that aren't important and therefore have more money for the things that are. Or have more time.
Was that a sentence? But yeah, that's
I
okay.
think
That
it
was
a long sentence.
That was that was a good summary. Yeah, I would also say to think about, is this purchase the most value that money can bring? And it doesn't necessarily need to be purchases. It can also be donations, or you can do a lot of different things with money.
Yeah, also regular subscription services, for example, they can cost a lot of money, and I think many people just don't bother quitting a subscription service they don't longer need because they think, oh, it's just $10 a month. But if you have 10 of those going on at the same time and you don't think about it, over time it really adds up. And if you are conscious about all your expenses, your fixed expenses as well as your everyday purchases, and you limit it to the essentials and the things that bring the most value, you can save a lot of money. Okay,
so that was it for this video. Hopefully you learned a bit more about financial minimalism. And I know money and finance is often a kind of a taboo topic. So if you don't agree with us, that's okay. Please don't feel offended. Please don't come at us.
And also note that, again, we aren't financial experts. We aren't financial advisors or anything. So we just share our thoughts and what we do with our money, and that doesn't mean that it's the universal financial truth. Don't take our word for it and do your own research if you are looking for information how to manage your money.
Thank you so much for watching. Thumbs this video up if you like it, and you can check out my channel for other mukbangs. We've done a few now and you guys have always liked it a lot. We'll see you in our next mukbang. Bye!
Bye!